Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Words, Words, Words. I'm Daniel.
I'm Heidi.
And Colin?
And as always, before we get into actual book discussion today, let's start with a icebreaker question. We're going to be looking at Gunmetal Gods today, which I'm excited to talk about. But I guess my question, kind of relating to the book here, is obviously this book is written by a Middle Eastern author with the idea of, instead of medieval European fantasy, bringing it out to the history of the Middle East and building the fantasy world around that. So if you were to look at any kind of period in history, where would you want to see a book written? It can be European, it could be somewhere else.
Interesting. My first thought, I feel like I don't have like a specific historical like time period, but my first thought was just Australia. Just like anything, because I feel like Australia is so scary. Like they have such scary creatures and stuff. So I feel like in the same vein of this book, like how it's, sort of horror fantasy, I feel like that would work really well with Australia. I wonder if any of that exists.
What also could be interesting about that is Australia was, penal colony when it was created. So you could have, you could have like a lot of brigands and rogues, and like that is who's on. That could be an interesting thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody write that.
That's a good one. Mine's tough. I think, weirdly enough, I would say like Cold War Russia would be a really, and like America, like both, like have a kind of, how we'll talk about, we have dual POVs here, a dual POV from like, and obviously not America and Soviet Union, but like two adjacent in that time period, same vibes. I think, I'm sure there's some good ones that somebody out there could tell me. I think some fantasy spy work and some fantasy Cold War stuff at play
for
would
sure.
be pretty gnarly and pretty fun.
I think mine would be, I think I'm going to default to Europe, but that is kind of where a lot of my historical knowledge goes. But specifically, I think an interesting period that might not be explored a lot in fantasy would be England, specifically the Restoration time period. So, long story short, they overthrew a king. Oliver Cromwell came in and said, we're getting rid of like all art, etc., and I'm in charge now. And then he got so bad they overthrew him, installed the king again. But what's interesting to me about that time period is that it led to a rediscovery of so much art. Shakespeare would not be Shakespeare as we know him without this time period, because in his own time, he was thought of as like the uneducated people's playwright, essentially. But it wasn't until the Restoration where they started to like actually rewrite the ending of Shakespeare. I know that sounds sacrilegious, but they would take like the ending of King Lear and, spoiler alert, not have King Lear die, or the end of Mackers and have like
alert for Shakespeare is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Or not have Mackers die. Again, spoiler alert.
For Shakespeare.
But yeah, they just rewrote these and they made happy endings. But because they rewrote them, people started to critically reassess them, and he became known as the Bard because of this time period. So I think it would be interesting. I did have a thought this week. I don't even remember what it was about, but like, I'm sure it already exists, but I'd be interested in seeing a fantasy novel that was written about like a theatrical troupe. That's extremely me of me, I know this, but but maybe I'll write it. Who knows? That will be mine.
Wasn't there like a war between humans and like emus or something?
Yes, the Great Emu War in Australia. Yes, where the emus actually won that war.
I was gonna say, didn't the Australians lose?
Yeah, somebody write a horror fantasy about that.
Dude, that could be creepy.
That would be insane and scary.
Hell yeah. But like I said, we are here to discuss Gunmetal Gods. Gut reactions, guys.
My gut reaction, I really, really liked. I think I was a love 95%. I think the ending, it fell off for me just a little bit. I did not love the ending too much. We'll talk about it in more detail there. But my initial gut reaction is just super strong, super good. I found it scary. I found it very fun too, like a fun page turner. Obviously not fun content wise, pretty brutal content. But
Yeah.
I
great
mean, look, if you like
characters.
Grimdark,
Yeah, true.
fun's relative, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic, just super dense, complicated characters, which I think is this the author's first book? I know it's
I
I
self-published.
no,
don't think so.
it looks like he's got a couple that predate Gunmetal Gods, but it looks like it was his first full-length novel, from what I'm
Yeah,
seeing at least.
regardless, newer author when this is written, and his character writing and world building is phenomenal, even compared to some of the greats already established. So it's, high praise there. I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, I liked it. I'm a pretty solid like. I don't know about really like. I had so many things that I really enjoy in it. So like most of the things that I didn't like about it are like pure preference, which we'll talk about like most of them later. Like the first person and the pacing of it was a little funny
Pacing
for
I have an
me.
issue with.
But it was scary. There were some brutal moments. There were some really emotional moments. I really, really found myself caring about the two main characters a lot. And I like more so than I maybe for like the first 25% of the book, I was like not really sold, but as I read further, I got deeper in, basically. I mean, just like the world building, it sucks you in, and it was definitely a page turner. And so yeah, overall, solid. Like stoked to continue.
Yeah, so this just off the bat ticked off three huge pluses for me. Number one, I'm just a sucker for fantasy in general. You add like flintlock fantasy to that, and that is quickly becoming a subgenre of interest to me. Second, obviously, with the cosmic horror, I've written cosmic horror plays, so something that I'm very interested in. I've run, for those of you who are TRPG players, a whole year, I think it was a year, of Delta Green, and we'll be coming back to it. So that's a huge plus for me. And then finally, I always find myself enjoying non-European medieval fantasy. Don't get me wrong, I do love my European medieval fantasy as well, but give me something that's different than that, and I'm a sucker for it. That being said, I think I came down on a really like, not necessarily a love. The things that it does well, it does really, really well.
Totally.
But there are pacing issues to it. It does speed up at times, and like a whole battle's done in like 2 paragraphs, and you're like, but I wanted I wanted to see that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe again that's, first novel kind of things. I'd be really interested to see how things progress in future novels. But like I said, the things that are done well in this book are done really well and executed on a high level. Kind of going off of that, this is a self-published novel. Now, it's a pretty well-known series in the self-published space. It was actually a semi-finalist self-published fantasy blog off. And so it's basically the awards that are an awards blog for self-publishing. There's usually somewhere around like 300 books per year. And in the year that Gunmetal Gods was published, which is 2020, it was a semi-finalist for that. So it got pretty far. And then obviously it's had some very successful Kickstarters. If you are a fan of just like, really, really nice books with excellent covers, seriously check out the work that he's done on there. If I could plop down $60 on a book right now, I'd be very tempted to, because they are gorgeous. But with that being said, what did you expect going into a self-published book? Were you surprised? And, would you want to check out more self-published works?
Yeah, honestly, I'm probably gonna make a lot of people mad because, and this is my own bias, I guess I had to confront. I was expecting it to be a lot rougher being self-published. I don't know, for some reason I was attaching kind of like a negative connotation to that just inherently, which there's no reason to. I was for some reason. I think I just couldn't help but think why wasn't it published through one of these big publishers? Seems like they pick up so many, but I mean, the lawyer in me should know better that, I mean, sometimes the terms are just shitty and not
Yeah.
worth it. So I kind of went in, I guess, kind of, and that's why I was so pleasantly surprised. I went in with this false kind of negative connotation of that. And I mean, as I was telling you guys, like I found the characters very well fleshed out. I found the world building immaculate. And definitely, yeah, this definitely made me no longer a bigot, I hope, against self-published authors. And I definitely need to check out some more because they're probably the ones who might need the support the most and probably deserve it the most because this book is rad.
Self-published fantasy in particular is picking up some steam. Have either of you guys heard of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series? It's pretty hot.
I had. I did not know that was self-published.
That was originally self-published and now just now has been picked up and is making huge splashes in the traditional publishing space. But for years, that was like one of the headlining self-published series.
That series is going
Self-published fantasy
crazy
in
right now.
particular is pretty hot.
Yeah, I didn't. That's interesting. And I've been afraid to pick up that series not because of that. I didn't know that until I mentioned it to us off the podcast before. But I didn't know that. I don't know why I don't know. Sometimes like things when they get super popular, it scares me because I'm like,
from
what
what I
if it's
know
bad?
about it, and I have not read it. We do have a friend who mentioned it this week, and I'm like, yes, it's on my radar. But the reason I think you might actually like it, Heidi, is that have you ever heard of Lit RPG?
Sounds familiar.
To not spend too much time on it, it's basically a literary version of like a tabletop RPG where like you are
yeah, that's
reading
what I
as
kinda
like,
thought.
from what I understand, he can like pull up a character sheet, etc., that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And as a
Sounds kind of
TRPG
silly.
reader,
It sounds kind of silly.
it does. But from what I understand, that's very much the oeuvre that it's going for is very silly fantasy.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think you'll like it.
I had kind of a similar, I think, experience that Colin talked about. I think to maybe like, well, I don't know to what degree your bias was, but I did find myself being like relieved almost that I'm like, okay, thank God, like, okay, this is good. Okay, cool. And I mean,
Yeah, same.
but also, whenever the two of you recommend a book to me, I am like, okay, I'll read it. Like, I trust your judgment pretty thoroughly. And it's so far served me well as far as, book reading goes. So there was always that thought in my head that I was like, okay, like, it wasn't like in the forefront of my mind that like, well, this is self-published, it's probably going to be bad. But also, like, that being said too, I don't really know what goes into self-publishing or publishing in general. So I think that probably also like made it so that like I said, I was like relieved knowing that it was self-published and still good, but like I wasn't really expecting it to be like horrible by any means.
I come from, as I've talked about before, the theater world, and I think what I liken it to almost is you can go to see a show on Broadway, but if you go to see a show on Broadway, it is very often commercialized. Most of the time today, it's, a theatrical production based on a movie. There's not a lot of creativity that goes into the actual writing of the piece. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that. It's my personal opinion. There is a lot of creativity that goes into the staging, the technical aspects, and that's why people go to see Broadway, is to see the chandelier come down in Phantom of the Opera or to see the puppetry in The Lion King. But to me, what's the most interesting stuff, especially when I was living in New York City, was either the off-Broadway stuff or even the off-Broadway stuff, which can just go weird. I remember seeing, I think it was called Bu, and it was essentially the story of the Jungle Book, but sung entirely in gibberish. Now, it was like, yeah, I know it sounds super fucking weird, but there was like rules to the language that they were using, and by the end, even though you couldn't understand it, you were like, okay, I'm in this story, I kind of get what's going on. There's something magical about that just couldn't get performed, could not get produced on a larger stage. I just came off of a run in Philadelphia Fringe. I don't think Heidi's seen the play that I wrote. I'm proud of it. I don't think that I could get a version of that play done at a normal theater for like a normal audience. And I think that's what I had expected going into self-publishing, where you might have some really, really cool ideas that just might not be something that a traditional publishing house would see as traditionally marketable.
And honestly, given, as we'll talk about later, what could potentially be a huge inspiration for this book, I could see a publisher being very weary to take up.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
So that being said, it was also my first foray into self-publishing. I'd seen reviews of this series that was like, okay, I know it's self-published, but I'm pretty convinced the people who I trust their opinions on are telling me that this is good quality. I think that maybe the pacing issues with a traditional editor might have been something that could have benefited from that traditional process. But that being said, for me, I'm really interested now in picking up, some of the SPFBO finalists and winners and checking those out over the years and seeing, cool, what else is out there in this more, kind of off the wall kind of stuff. And I think that even beyond, what I think you're referring to, Colin, mixing fantasy with Lovecraftian cosmic horror is a kind of off the wall idea. Now, for a very specific group of people, which I fall into, that's music to my ears. But I could see if that might not be something that publishing houses would think would sell extremely well. But no, self-publishing is an avenue that I've seen other like content creators, Daniel Green and others, go through, and I think it's really cool that we have that in this space now, where say what you will about Amazon, but getting it in there is easy to do that now, and I think that is driving a lot of its, the Kindle store and all that. There's a lot of problems with Amazon. There's a lot of problems with the Kindle store. There's a lot of problems with Audible, but I think you also can't deny that it does help.
It gives a voice.
Yeah. Okay, so what does having a Middle East-inspired setting provide that we don't always get in a genre that is so Eurocentric? How did you find it reading about a world that was so inspired by Middle Eastern history?
I personally loved it. I will be talking about this book at the end, so I'm preemptively calling dibs, Heidi. But there's another...
No, you better not.
There's another fantasy book that is not based on medieval Europe, and that's Dandelion Dynasty. And it is
That's
so
crazy.
refreshing to read that book and see to see that one's Chinese culture. And it's actually straight Chinese history. I mean, the first book is literally the Chuhan contention in China, like to a T, perfectly, like better than my teachers taught it. And it's refreshing when you can get different settings and different inspirations, and because then it fuels the magic. Because every culture is different and every setting is different. But if you're doing the same one, we're kind of just having different fonts of similar magic systems. And Dandelion Dynasty calls it like a silk punk fantasy, right? And you have big thing in Asian culture, right? It's kites and lanterns and stuff. So he uses that to make the magic system, and it's badass. This one, it's very similar. We have a lot of Middle Eastern culture that's fueling the magic and the characters. Even just the scenery and the setting is more interesting. So it's always really refreshing when we can get something that's different. It was amazing and refreshing to read. And I love when we get a chance to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, well, and also like the representation. Like, we're 3 white people. We see ourselves in everything. So let's give the Middle East a chance, And I've always said that. But also, like,
Heidi says that all the time. We're just having a normal conversation.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly.
That's your campaign slogan right there.
Yeah, and this is where I'm announcing. No, I'm so sorry.
I think George W. Bush had a very similar slogan, but for different reasons, giving the Middle East a chance.
No, not me and George Bush in the same sentence.
But
please.
you're the good. I've always said this. You're the good George W. Bush.
And Colin has always said that about me.
I have always said this on record.
Yeah, but like not only that, but you can just tell too. Like the author is Middle Eastern. He was like born. I don't know. I can't remember exactly where. You can just tell that like it's the setting and the world building was so well done. Like he just like cradled this place that he's from in his hands and like presents it to you on such a beautiful like magical platter that it's like you can just tell how much he loves the source material. Like,
Yeah, you can
you
tell.
know, and it's just it was, I mean, like Colin said, it was just a refreshing like new, I mean, the Middle East isn't new, but like the book is.
Oldest region in the world.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know of any other fantasy that is like set in this way. And now because of this, I would very much like to read more of it because it was the world building specifically was something that was done so well. It was executed so well that it speaks to like I said, how much he loves it. And now I would like to read more from it.
He lives in Dubai now. I just looked at his site. But yes, absolutely. I've always found it interesting to learn about other cultures, and I think fantasy is a great way to do that. I think we get a lot of European fantasy because we're, America is largely Eurocentric. There's a lot of authors that we're going to read in English from here and England. And where are they going to write about? They're going to write Eurocentric fantasy. But I think it also obviously goes back to Tolkien. A lot of fantasy goes back to Tolkien. And so I think setting it in that kind of cultural imagination is a little bit of a cheat code sometimes, where you don't have to explain a lot to your readers to get them up to date, There's only so many times that we can talk about how, what orcs and goblins and such are. But when we get something that's set so concretely in a world like this, it just opens up the possibilities for the story to go in some different angles that that might not be possible in European fantasy. It also, I think, challenges some of our cultural biases. I know in the beginning, I was trying to figure out, okay, between Micah and Keva, who do I think is in the right here? And before, Micah kind of went off the deep end a little bit, he was talking about a lot of things that, like the idea of the harems or how, the injustices of the world, that I'm like, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think, it's interesting that that's not if you want to assign a good side and a bad side, we'll talk about that later. I think that came out as maybe the good side. I don't know. Although I think it's clear that the author was saying basically nobody's perfect in this. That being said, I was going to say exactly what you said, Heidi, where I definitely want to read more Middle Eastern fantasy now. Have either of you heard of City of Brass?
I've heard of it. I
Yeah.
haven't read it though.
It is moved so high up on my to be read list now because of this book, because it's another Middle Eastern fantasy series, and I'd heard really good things, and now I'm like, cool. Let me just read more of this. So yeah, I'm all on board here. I think you touched on this, Colin, before. So we have an interesting writing style here where we go back and forth every chapter, basically, apart from 2 chapters, between being in first-person perspective from the perspective of Micah the Metal, who is representing Serm, and we have, or I guess is allied with Serm for a while. And then we have Keva, who is on the side of Crucius. What'd you make of the dual first-person point of views? Are they both protagonists? What do you make of this?
I typically like dueling POVs. Another thing the Dandelion Dynasty does really well.
Yeah.
I typically like it. I think you can tell a much broader story when you have dueling POVs, especially where quite literally dueling. I think you can tell just a much wider story, a much more complex, layered, especially given the setting of this one, kind of show the true that there are some conflicting natures to this situation. The story, I mean. And I personally enjoy it, especially because it really, I mean, if we're just looking from Keva's perspective, and especially in the beginning, before, like you said, Mike kind of loses it a little bit. You would just be thinking like, well, fuck these invaders. Like, of course I'm allied with my homeboys here. Like, these are my guys. And I think that's something. Another one that does really well with this is is first law, how a lot of our POV characters are absolute horrible humans or things. And I typically enjoyed it, or I typically do enjoy it, I mean to say. And it's done really well here. And in the beginning, it really did make me, I even have in my notes like Micah kind of spitting. And then a couple reviews later is, oh my God, I hate Micah. So
Yeah, yeah.
a couple months later. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I like it in books, and I think this one does it well. I always get excited when I see that. First person doesn't bother. I know both of you had expressed qualms typically with first person. It doesn't bother me.
It's not my favorite. It's not a make or break. It's not like automatic. I don't like it, but I prefer third person, especially in fantasy, I think.
I get that. I do. I like hearing thought process though. Like I like the inner monologues that you can get with it.
You'd like Shakespeare then.
Yeah, I like the different POVs. I feel like it, like first person, we don't have to go too much into it. I honestly, especially with this book, it was something that really bothered me. I don't really know why. I think it was because of the pacing, honestly, that it bothered me so much.
That's
Because
valid.
and like the reason why I don't take like points off for it or whatever in reviews, not that that really matters, but is because I think the first person made the pacing kind of make sense a little bit, even though I didn't like it. When, you know, when you're one person and you're in the middle of a giant battle, like it moves way too fast or way too slow. It's like from that person's perspective. So like as I was reading it, I was like, okay, it kind of makes sense, but I don't like it. I don't like it. I want a more wide-angled view, which sometimes we got, and occasionally I think it took away from my personal enjoyment. But that being said, it also made me really, 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 I kind of mentioned this at the start. It made me really, really care about the characters. I mean, when you're inside their brain, how can you not? Even Micah's crazy ass. Like when he is like killing babies, I wasn't like pro that. I wasn't pro that like at all. And this is me sharing my stance on killing babies, which is
That scene was wild.
I
I
am
mean, that's pretty controversial there, Heidi.
pretty anti that. And you know what? It really is. But I didn't like that. But like seeing it from his perspective, I didn't side with him. Okay.
I was gonna say, where are you
But
going
like,
with this?
but I just like, it made it interesting.
I get you. I do get you. Because
Like,
he thinks he's in the right, and he has this
yeah,
justification built up in his head that
exactly. Yeah. And like,
it's a
I didn't
nutty
like sympathize with
justification.
that, but I understood it. Not sympathizing, but like you're in his head. Like you see it from his point of view. And that is interesting to me. I read a lot of fucked up books, so it feeds into that.
Leaving aside my own personal thoughts about, preferring third person, I think what was interesting here now, I have not read the Dandelion Dynasty. I know both of you are raving about it, so it's been on my list, and I'm going to have to read it. But I have not been exposed, I guess, a lot to first person point of views from what ostensibly would usually be protagonist and antagonist side. And I think you can make plenty of argument that Micah is obviously more of an antagonist, but I think what's interesting here is that it humanizes both sides. Like you said, Heidi, Micah does some really fucked up shit. Kills children, for better or for worse now as a demon, has sex with his own daughter.
Yeah, that was a weird
That
scene.
was very
That was
difficult to
crazy.
read. Also, and content warning essay right now, tries to sexually assault a woman right before that happens. He does some really messed up stuff, but you always understand where he's coming from. And it doesn't make him a good person, but you also know what's been done to him, and you know what you're in his head. You understand that he has a reason. Think of the worst people in history. No one did things because they thought they were evil. Everyone thinks they're the protagonist of their own story. And we're getting both of those point of views here. I mean, Keva does some messed up stuff as well. This is Grimdark, after all.
Yeah.
But I think not just does it humanize each other, but it also shows you where the flaws in each of the societies are, because you're seeing where Crucius thinks that Serm is messed up and where Serm thinks that Crucius is messed up. It both humanizes and demonizes both sides, where it is no one's good. Everyone's some kind of shade of gray. This is not like we said before. This is not Tolkien fantasy. This is everybody's shades of gray, and which of your shades is a little bit darker than the other one. Who do you end up rooting for? But yeah, I appreciated the dual first person point of views, even if it's not my favorite cup of tea here. Again, kind of using this as a jumping off point. What do we think about the two main factions? Is there a good side? And do you see any historical? Obviously, Zamil Akhtar, the author here, says that he wrote this about, or based at least the world building on more medieval portions of the Middle East, but I can't help drawing conclusions to more recent events in the Middle East. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on the two nations, the world building, etc.
Yeah, I will say, oddly, I found the two factions kind of hard to follow. I mean, they're well written, but for some reason I kept getting lost in the different like rules and leaders and kind of just structure of each side too. So I think that kind of confused me with some stuff as my initial like kind of warning as I'm about to talk. But definitely with Keva's faction in the beginning being the I definitely found myself more aligned with that faction, especially it's amplified by Micah's later actions for two main reasons. One, I'm always going to be a sucker for if we're at home and home gets attacked, I'm always gonna just naturally lean towards the home faction. Now we learn, right, that what was the name of their leader? Not Shaman?
Serm.
Sir?
SIRM.
No, like their leader.
Shah.
That he might have done. We find that he's a horrible father, we learn in the book, and probably was pretty brutal to rise to his power, to get to his position naturally. So obviously not completely hands wiped clean, but I always will be anti-invader typically. So I found myself more aligned with that faction. Also, I cannot stand religious zealousy. I guess that's kind of redundant to say, but I cannot stand zealots going and doing everything in the name of their proper religion. So I hated Micah kind of almost immediately for that stuff. And I mean, literally, like we can't like the child scene where he's like, he drowns the kid, right? He's like putting the kid's head in the water. He's like, convert, like say it's like admit. It's like, oh my God, like what are we doing? Drawing that, I do think that you can draw a lot of Israel-Palestine connections there. I would only be hesitant on it just because I think our homeland here is more at fault than Palestine would be. But I do think, I think it'd be silly not to see those connections like you mentioned. So you're definitely valid for bringing those up. And but yeah, it's a long way of me saying I kind of sided with the home people. I don't like invaders and I don't like zealots.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to a degree, I mean, it was definitely purposeful, but like, yeah, I think because of that, like because of how muddy it kind of was, like who really is good and who really is bad, like it kind of makes it realistic. I think like it's not black and white. It's more complicated. It's always more complicated. Although, I mean, I do tend to agree with you, like invader kind of bad. And also killing babies bad. Like I said, it's still
You're very
Sometimes it
strong
can
on
be
that
black and
message,
white.
Heidi. Killing babies is
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're taking a stance here.
Finally,
Yeah,
we've been
yeah,
wondering.
thank
The
you.
people have been
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah.
What's Heidi's
And I
stance
know
on
that.
drowning children? Yeah.
Yeah, it is bad. But I think too, like, well, there's no but for that. Listen, I know how the internet works, okay? Things can get clipped and I'm gonna sound crazy.
I'm going to clip it.
Yeah, okay. Even better. Jesus Christ. I think for me, like Micah and the Paladins were the bad stuff is so interesting.
Whenever I think of, historical analogs and novels, I always think of J.R.R. Tolkien, who essentially said that he thought that, historical analogs were stupid, and that anybody drawing conclusions between Lord of the Rings and World War II he had nothing to do with that, and if you did, then that was your thoughts, but he would say that you were wrong. But that being said, I don't think if you're an author you can help but be influenced by current events that are going on around you.
100%.
Yeah.
Israel and Palestine has been a thing to various extents for as long as any of us have been alive. Things have escalated in recent years, but it's been an ongoing conflict. And I can't help but, think of CERM, who's coming across the ocean with trying to reclaim essentially their homeland, what they think is their homeland, to that conflict. And while we all might be unified in our political beliefs, there's plenty of people out there who would say that we are wrong, that the side that we disagree with in that conflict is actually in the right. And again, I'm going to bring that back to the dual first person, where I think Akhtar does a pretty good job here of showing us both of these sides have at least some moral claim, have at least something that drives them that you can be like, yeah, okay, go for it. I don't think there's a good side necessarily here. I think there's a side that won, and I think there's a side that lost. And I think that's well shown in the ending, where essentially CERM and Crucius almost team up here to go against or at least they try to go against Micah, and then, the cosmic horror of it all fucks things up, and it ends up that they're back at each other again after a momentary almost peace. I'll let that segue me into my next question. I'm very well versed in cosmic horror. Did the Lovecraftian ness of this novel work for you? Yes or no? Why did it? And how do you feel about the mashup of genres?
I think it mostly worked for me for one reason, and that's because I think it was established pretty early that some of these elements would be at play. And I think once we get some more reveals into like kind of some of these beings, into some of these kind of scenes, like we knew there was going to be like a crazy, creepy, like something eventually happened with Ashir and the true god or something like that. So I think once we finally get to some of those scenes and some of those reveals and see some of these beings and well described, like through like Micah's trips or through the resurrection scene that we'll go through, I think it kind of served as like a payoff moment for me. Like, so I think it moved the plot forward, which made it work for me. I think the mashup was interesting. I liked it a lot. It actually didn't feel too, I hate to say this because it's going to sound like a diss, but I don't mean it as a diss. It didn't actually feel too unique to me. I feel like, I don't know. And maybe it's me not understanding the genre enough because I have now one book experience with it, and that's The Fisherman that we did together. So I don't know. It didn't feel anything extraordinary to me, if that makes sense. Like it kind of like when we get to some of these alleged higher beings and some of these kind of monstrosities that get shown, I'm like, yeah, I've read that in fantasy books before. But it didn't feel anything unique to me. And I don't mean that as a diss. I think it was done really well, and I really enjoyed it, and I want more of that.
Yeah, it was true to the Lovecraftian horror genre, I think. Yeah, like just with the depictions of the gods and also like their effects. Just, I mean, it's why Micah is the way he is. Like, the more you delve into it, the more insane it gets. And I think that's really that's the spirit of, from my understanding of Lovecraft. I mean, I haven't actually read that much of H.P. Lovecraft's works, but I've, experienced other types of, that genre of horror. And I thought especially when it comes to Ashir, I thought her character was very, very much because nothing about what happened to her really was explained. Like, you have
Yeah.
I have
very
so many
mysterious.
questions and none of them were answered, and she's just that way. Maybe in future books we get an explanation, but I kind of almost hope not, because
Yeah, I prefer it without, weirdly. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's very much in the spirit of the genre, and I really, really enjoyed that about it. I like scary, weird stuff.
Yeah, Ashir was my favorite part, probably, actually.
Yeah. So I think what makes this mashup cool to me at least is going off of what you said, Heidi. Now this is a very Lovecraftian idea of cosmic horror, and cosmic horror has obviously expanded since Lovecraft's time, but this is a very Lovecraftian version of it, where you have these gods are ineffable, but even gazing upon a god will drive you insane. And I think that's what's cool to me in this setting is Keva sees this one-eyed jellyfish thing out in the ocean that's giant and is just driven to the point of near madness of, I've got to get away from this. I don't know. He's affected by it. And in plenty of other fantasy, there are, deities that you might not understand, but they're not controlling things. They're not always incomprehensible in what they are doing. That's what you get, I think, in this Lovecraftian mashup. And from what I've heard, future books really stick to the cosmic horror a lot more than this first one does. I think you just got a little bit of a flavor of it in this first book, whereas from what I've heard, book 3 and 4 are very cosmic horror centric almost in this fantasy. And that to me makes me want to continue reading because as a fan of both of these genres, I think he melded them very well. And I just want to see where he takes this. I'm going to wrap this up with one final question, which is a lot happens in the ending. I think you talked about it, Heidi, that it wasn't necessarily your favorite. How do we feel about that ending? We have Micah and Ashir dying. We have Sadie dying and then being, resurrected. Keva basically undergoes a complete ego death. And it reminded me of a thing in Doctor Who, the final, well, you do have a week with her or whatever it was. And he goes off to explore the world a little bit with her. Yeah. What do you make of the ending? If it wasn't your favorite, Heidi, what did you like? What didn't you like? Yeah.
Well, okay. I didn't love the resurrection. I think that it kind of took away from Keva's arc, because I feel like his entire arc, he is sort of he's grieving his wife, who we find out is still alive or whatever she is.
She's a sheer, at least.
Yeah. And so throughout his arc in the book, he eventually redirects his energy into Sadie, basically. And I thought that I feel like her staying dead would have been the natural progression of it, and then her coming back to life and him becoming something completely different. I just think it took away from that. And I really, really liked Keva as a character, so I just thought that the story continues, so I'm assuming we get more in future books. Maybe it resolves itself in a different way in a future book, but yeah, I thought it took away from his story a little bit.
Yeah, to me, the ending is what pegged the book down to me, and it's not so much how I think it emphasized my biggest issue with the book, which is what both of you guys have talked about with its pacing. It felt so there's, we both, I'm gonna use a Sanderson example because we all love him and have experience with him. He is known for his Sanderlands, right? The last part of his book having so much filled in it. But it doesn't feel badly paced. It's just sometimes Sanderlands is literally 200 pages long, right? It's long, right? I once made the mistake of, I forget, I used to know the chapter number, but of reading starting the end of The Way of Kings at 11 p.m. I didn't go to sleep until 4 a.m. because I couldn't stop. But it was long, right? He takes the time he needs to flesh out. And, he may get more leeway or have more experience with that. So, I'm not going to be comparing authors here, but it did feel like a lot of these things we would learn new information and then we would move on. And I think one of my I made a note of it. We talked about the big reveal with Keva's wife being Ashir, which I think we all saw coming, and I don't think that's a knock to the author. Another reveal, which I also saw coming, is Melody ends up being Micah's lost daughter, who he thought was dead, he lies to himself and to his people that he's doing the revolution in the name of God, but he's really doing it for revenge, right? And he finds out that his daughter's alive. We, as the reader, find out that Melody is Micah's daughter, and we move on. We get in one sentence, and then we just all right, and then we just move on. So it felt like even with I think his name's like ARs or ears, the liberating force that kind of saves them from what was the resurrected General Heraclitus or something like that.
Heraclius, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That kind of liberates them from Heraclius, who kind of comes in and saves the day. That battle was like a paragraph long.
I
And
hated
I
that.
was like,
I
are you kidding
hated
me?
that.
Like, I thought we were gonna get an epic, like, chapter long battle at least. No, Tarmangaddon is longer than Sorcerer's Stone or whatever that Harry Potter's book name is. I, I wanted something like that. I wanted conflict. So I think the end just kind of emphasized that flaw a little bit to me, in the sense that yeah, a lot happens in a decent amount of pages, but it was all it felt I liked what happened. I think the plot wise was really interesting, and I just think it happened a little too quick. That's my knock on it. I am excited where it sets things up, though. I'm gonna disagree with Heidi a little bit. I actually like where Kiba ends up. I'm very interested to see him kind of embrace the Magi way now that he kind of has no choice but to with Lat. At the end, I'm excited to learn more about Lat. I think she's either going to be goaded or a horrible being. So far, it seems like might be goaded. So I'm excited to learn more. Um, I'm also Araya or Aria, kind of the thing that Ellie actually was, but that was very scary. So I'm excited to learn more there too. But yeah, I like what happened. I just didn't like it.
Yeah. Uh, no, I definitely agree with both of you when you talk about how the battles felt unsatisfactory. I think I watched Daniel Green's, who's a booktuber, review on this, and one of his knocks was it's clear what Akhtar was and wasn't interested in, and I don't think Akhtar was super interested in actually, the grand scale battles that some of us might be more interested in. I think he was
Which is
more
valid.
interested in the personal stories. Yes, which is valid. I would have liked to see more. I will, that did knock it from a love down to just a really like for me. That being said, so death is a huge thing in cosmic horror and Lovecraftian horror. There's a really well-known quote, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die." And you saw it in The Fisherman too, where things that in cosmic horror a lot, things that are brought back from the dead aren't always brought back fully whole. So I'm interested to see if he makes anything of that with Sadie. Is Sadie really back, or is there something come back with Sadie? I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's a thing at the end of the book, but that might just be because it's the end of the book. Maybe it gets revealed over time. I don't know. I do know that, because I did look ahead, that the second book does not necessarily follow Keva and Sadie. We follow some new characters, and I think we see them. It's not until book 3 that we get more of them, which is always interesting to me when you it's more about the setting than the characters themselves. But I know that we do get back to Keva and Sadie. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I wasn't thrilled about the ending with is I wish that Keva's choice. So when Ashir is like, we can be a family again. I can love you. We just need to basically destroy the world and submit to Hawa.
Yeah.
I wish that his choice was more weighty, more morally gray, because yes, it's his long lost wife. He's in love with her, but that's not a good enough reason to completely betray the world. If there was just something more there that didn't make that decision as easy as it was to shiv his wife, I would have been more on board with the ending.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I am interested to see where things progress. Yeah. Final thoughts. Where does this land for you? Whether you want to make this a rating out of 5 stars, or if you want to put it tiers like some of us have been doing. How do you rate the book?
I think these are always the toughest for me to rate. If I had, I can't really put into words how I feel, if that makes sense. I really like the book. If I had to assign a score, I'd say like 7.58, which I'd say 7 to 7.5, 7 to 7.5 out of 10. I'm excited to continue book 2 ASAP and starting book 2 ASAP. It's like, okay, I am really excited to continue. I do want to continue, but I'm a maybe finish some of my other series first and then continue. So that'd be my rating. But solid. I recommend.
Yeah, I kind of agree The rating I think is 7.5 out of 10. I'm glad I read it. I enjoyed. There were some banger lines. It was emotional, and I mean, just the opening. We talked about it a little bit last week, like really good opening lines to book was you don't refuse the summons from the shadow of God or something. Banger.
Pretty good.
And so yeah, I enjoyed. I will be happy to continue whenever we do that down the line.
We had a talking
Yeah.
chicken boy, so that's a plus.
Yeah.
Did
He
either of
was the
you end
best.
up buying the physical book or not?
I do have a physical copy. I'm in a hotel, but I don't have
Because
it. But
one of the fun things that you get at the end of this, if you haven't seen it, Heidi, is that there is a little illustration of the little chicken boy.
My
terrifying.
God. Holy shit.
Exactly what I pictured, though.
Yeah.
I did find it. I was not expecting the humor that you got out of I forget what the character's name is, but that was an unexpected part of the voice of the novel for me, was the humor that you got out of him, especially when it's like that's the reason that your shoes are missing and you can never find, the full pair.
He also provides us one of the most heart-wrenching aspect at the end in chapter 31 where he wants to resurrect Melody, and he's like basically saying like, hey, she made this choice to die for her country, and we get that good Cava line where he's like, but the country's not worthy of her. I love that moment.
This is for me a book on the shelf. I liked it enough that it's for sure going on the shelf. What would change this into a place of honor on the shelf is if I wanted to fork out the money for the special edition, because when you consider everything as a whole, God, it's gorgeous. Akhtar killed the Kickstarter. Seriously, look it up. It is, especially as somebody who loves cosmic horror, the way that the beings are on the cover. And if you look at some of the pieces of art that's included in those special editions, very, very cool stuff. And if I remember right, the art, most of it is done by artists who have ties to the Middle East, or who often do like Middle Eastern kind of mythological art, which is just another really, really fucking cool thing, because it's not something that we are necessarily exposed to a lot as Westerners. So that when you consider the novel as a whole, I do consider art, and I do consider the packaging and everything. So I that would knock it up to a place of honor on the shelf for me if I had that special edition. I don't, so it's just going to go on the bookshelf. I'll start us off because I don't think either of you have read the book that I would recommend. If you like this book, check out this. City of Stairs would be one for me. It's the entire series, I believe, is called the Divine Cities trilogy, but you have essentially a continent based on India and a continent, I believe, based on Russia. So you get a little bit of that extra flavor that you don't always get. I really enjoy that. Very different tonally. It's not Grimdark, but there's enough going on with the gods where I think if you like Gunmetal Gods, check that out. It's a little bit different, but I think you'll enjoy it. Kind of already spoiled yours, Colin, but go for it.
Mine is The Grace of Kings and the Dandelion Dynasty. For a lot, I think if you do like this, you'll really like the Dandelion Dynasty. It's by Ken Liu. I don't know if I told you guys, I apparently have been reading Ken Liu like my entire life because he is a Star Wars writer.
Nice.
He writes a lot of the Star Wars novels that I have grown up reading. So I was organizing my bookshelf the other day. I was like, why do I have so many Ken Liu books?
Doesn't surprise me, actually, because I talked about the fact that I'm probably going to recommend these at some point. He translated the Three Body Problem novels. So he's got a hand in sci-fi, he's got a hand in fantasy, and Star Wars is like smack dab in the middle there, whereas fantasy in a sci-fi setting.
Yeah, he's so good, and the Dandelion Dynasty is the best thing I've read by him by far. I'm only halfway through the series because can't find the third book, and this one I think is one I have to read physical just because it is they are dense reads. They're worth taking your time and looking at glossaries, looking at terms, looking up character names. The pronunciations can be very difficult because it is based on Chinese history, based on the Chuhan contention and the fall. So it briefly explained the rise of the dynasty, which is based off the Qing dynasty, I believe, and the very quick collapse of that. And then the book is based upon that period of time in China, which actually happened where we had two factions vying for that power in that vacuum, who were initially allied and then are now trying to go for that space. And it's it has one stupid scene in the book that I wish didn't exist, but other than that, it is flawless. And once you read
I
it,
know
you'll know
exactly what
exactly
you're
what
talking
scene I'm
about.
talking about. But it is otherwise flawless book. It has a lot of heart. And then the second book, Wall of Storms, is even better. Wall of Storms is, I think, other than Morning Star, the only book I've given like a straight 10 out of 10 to. And A Memory of Light. But A Memory of Light I literally ranked as A Memory of Light. So that one doesn't
Yeah,
count.
you
But
can't. It's yeah.
you can't rank it. It's not fair. But yeah, it's the series gets better. I heard the third one's even better than A Wall of Storms, so I'm excited if I can ever get my hands on it. It's so good. It's it's fantasy that's based in a different setting than we're used to. It has a totally inventive magic system, and it's just really good. It has the dueling POVs and brotherhood, betrayal, all of it, all you could want.
I am a sucker for a good magic system.
um, the second Mistborn, because it's like fantasy with guns and a cool magic system, and there's guns in this one, which it's a simple connection, but hey, if you like guns and fun magic.
Powder Mage is also like that. I haven't read it yet, but I know it's Flintlock fantasy, and it's on my list of things that I need to pick
Yeah.
up at some point.
Yeah, and I personally loved it, so
Heidi, what's our book for next week?
I've got it right here. In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. I've already started it.
So have I.
It's a thriller. I don't know that much about it. I don't even remember why it's on my TBR, but I like thrillers. I like the heart pounding, and so far it's fine. So
I'm not sure.
I am looking forward to
I'm
it.
like halfway through, and I still don't know completely what's going on, but it's interesting, and it's definitely mysterious, so it'll be a fun discussion next week, I'm sure. Well, then, for the podcast, I'm Daniel.
I'm Heidi.
Colin?
And keep reading, everybody. All right, bye. Hey, everyone. Before we go, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at contact@wordswordspod.com. Don't worry, I'll put it in the text of the show. Or you can find us on Instagram at wordswordspod. Whether you have book recommendations, thoughts on today's discussion, or just want to say hi, we are always excited to connect with fellow readers.
And speaking of community, if you're looking for more conversation between episodes, we've got a Discord server where we talk books, share recommendations, and just generally geek out about all things speculative fiction. The link is in the show notes, and we'd love to see you there.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and following us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast needs served. It really helps us reach more readers and keep those conversations going. Thanks so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time on Words, Words, Words.